Hello, this is Todd Luck, and this is a review of Ultraman Classics Battle of the Ultra Brothers from Viz Comics. This is a retro review. This is an American comic that came out in the 90s, and this is one I didn't know about. I thought I had all the Ultraman comics printed in America, and then when I was doing research for these videos, I found out I was missing a series. So I went ahead and bought this. And so what is it? It is a reprint of a 1975 manga series named The Ultraman by Mamoru Uchiyama. So I couldn't find a lot of information about this online. The creator was known for doing Ultraman adaptations. I found something about him that said that he was known for doing Ultraman adaptations in manga starting in 1971 with the return of Ultraman. So there's clearly more Japanese comics that exist of Ultraman than what is being reprinted right here, and that makes me kind of sad, but I am very glad we got what we got. This is actually reprinting the story that Jackal vs. Ultraman, the animated short, was based on. That came out a few years ago for the anniversary. I highly recommend, if you can, read this first. The short is a very, very abridged and a kind of incoherent adaptation, and this is the full story, which is much better, and it's just a great, great series overall. As far as when this came out, that's kind of another mystery, but there are ads in the back of one issue for comics coming out in 1993. So that's when I think this series came out. That does make it overlap with Harvey Comics' new material on Ultraman that was coming out at that same time. But Harvey Comics was basing their comics off of the recent series Ultraman Towards the Future. And since this is reprinting old manga, then it could easily have been licensed that was at two separate companies doing two separate things with the same franchise. And I know some of you are probably like, but that's not what Japanese manga looks like. You can't reprint it in that format. This is what Japanese manga should look like. And that is what it looks like now. This is how it's reprinted in America. It's very close to how it's done in Japan. But this wasn't always the obvious way to do it. Japanese text is oriented differently than the way we write our text, and their books are oriented right to left instead of left to right like we read. So it was a very different kind of format to bring to America. And plus, comic shops didn't have a space on the shelf for this. They had a space on the shelf for this. Comic book fans didn't have comic boxes for this. They had comic boxes for this. So it made sense to at least try and experiment, to bring it in different formats and, kind of adapt it to the American audience. And so that took the form of sometimes reformatting it into an American comic that was in black and white, or an American comic that was in color. And I even have Go-Go 13 comics reprinted like this in this high quality format with very nice paper, very nice cover stock. This thing even has a dust cover. So there was a lot of experimentation before they essentially decided to kind of skip the comic shops and just put the manga on bookstore shelves, and that's where it found its audience in a very similar format. This is, kind of newsprint, kind of paper. And, it's been successful, and we've kind of formed, a couple different groups of comic fans in America now. Comic fans that are, mostly American comic fans, and then ones that are almost exclusively Japanese comic fans. So that's kind of a little bit of history. As you can tell, I don't mind different formats for comics. As you can see behind me, I've got giant size treasury editions. I got magazines. I got a hardcover book reprinting Russ Manning Tarzan. I love different formats, especially if it gives you bigger art, which this format for Ultraman does. So let's dig in to Battle of the Ultra Brothers and see what this comic is like. And so let's take a look at the covers. And as you can probably tell from some of that Go-Go 13 stuff I was showing you, a lot of the Japanese covers are essentially just showing the character. It's not a scene from the interior. And so it's more like a book cover. And that may be because, you know, they essentially are designing it to go on a bookshelf at a bookstore. And so you'll find that with all of these covers. You know, they showcase the characters within, but without really, you know, being related to the interior. But they do give you a nice sense of what the characters look like and that it's probably something cosmic. And honestly, in this case, I think that's a pretty good thing. I think the Ultras have always looked cool. I think, you know, showcasing, you know, their costumes is a good thing. And it really is eye-catching, and I think it would intrigue a new reader. Now, the covers also do not show the scale of an Ultra. And normally, I would say that is a bad thing, but it's actually appropriate in the context of this series. And so let me put in context what this series is about. So in the TV series, typically an Ultra will come down, he'll merge with a human, and when the human needs help against a giant monster, he'll use a transformation device and become the Ultra and become, you know, a big giant guy and fight the monster. And then at the end of the original series, the Ultra splits off from the human and flies into outer space to return to his homeworld. Which I assume is probably a normal thing. You know, normally they would go back and, you know, be outer space cops and go back to their homeworld and stuff like that. And we never really get to see what happens to them afterwards. We just get kind of tantalizing hits, little crossovers, little cameos. You know, there was a scene in Ultraman Ace where they teased, like, you're going to get to see the Ultraman homeworld. And it was only like a couple minutes when it happened, but it was still really cool because you got to see the Ultraman's homeworld, you know. And so what this series is what the Ultras do when they're not on Earth. This is the story of them being cosmic policemen. This is the story of what they do on their homeworld, defending their homeworld. This is every child's dream Ultraman series. This is the stories you could just dream about that you would never actually see, you know, told in any length in the television series. So this is awesome. And to add on to that, the lead Ultra that most of these stories revolve around is Ultraman Zoffy. And you may not be familiar with the name if you just watched the original series, but I guarantee you probably remember Zoffy. Zoffy is Ultraman's boss who appears in the final episode. So this is a series that revolves around Ultraman's boss. And that is freaking awesome. And so these are nice, thick, 64-page comics. They're essentially graphic novels. This is 5 64-page comics, which is the equivalent of 15 regular issues. So you're getting a lot per issue. And so it is indeed in black and white. And I think that's a good call because, as you can see, the reds on the Ultras are colored in black. They are inked in. And so that would be very hard to colorize. So it looks great in black and white. It's simple artwork, but this is 1970s style, you know, anime, manga type of art. And honestly, you know, if you've watched my channel a lot, you know I got a soft spot in my heart for this stuff. And it's great. It is, you know, art isn't necessarily about how many lines you can put on a page. It's about what those lines are saying, knowing when you have enough to tell the story and then not putting more. Now, that being said, there is nothing wrong with super detailed art. And we will see the flip side of that in the next mini-series that I do a retro review of with Ultraman Tiga, which we will take a look at Japanese style art that is very detailed and has a lot of lines in it. but I think there's certainly room for both of these art styles. And this is the way the humans are drawn in issue 2. And again, super nostalgia rush for me. I mean, this just takes me back to, shows like Star Blazers and stuff that I grew up on. And speaking of Star Blazers, or Space Battleship Yamato as it's known in Japan, there are ships inspired by that anime all over this manga, and I love it. And the aliens they meet have a lot of the same type of feel and look that you would find in 70s anime like Transor Z, or Mazinger Z as it was known in Japan, which is also a big soft spot in my heart. So awesome. And because it's a series told from the Ultra's point of view, we don't actually see them as giants. On their homeworld, they're not giants. Everything is sized the way they are. When they go out and fight other giant species, everything, looks like it would if we fought somebody. And it makes sense. Again, this is from their point of view. When they come to Earth, yeah, we see that they're giants in issue 2. But, from their point of view, we're the small ones. They're the right size. And another big difference between this and the show is that because this is a story about Ultras told from their own point of view around other Ultras, they do talk to each other a lot. Ultras tend to be very silent on the show. They only use their ability to communicate telepathically very, very sparingly. But here is constant talk between the Ultras. And it's kind of interesting. It's definitely a very different point of view that, you don't normally get to see. And so the first plot line is the Jackal epic, which we introduce a new villain named the Jackal who has his own army, and he's super, super powerful, and he attacks the Ultras to devastating effect, and it is amazing. The first issue begins with a series of battles between monsters that are supposed to be dead and the different Ultras that have had TV series up until now. And these are monsters that were the most powerful monsters that each of these Ultras faced. They have the distinction of having defeated them. And you don't have to have watched the series that these Ultras come from to appreciate these scenes. But I will say, if you want to look up each of the monsters and watch the episodes they appear in, I think it will give you a deeper appreciation of how well rendered and how well captured each of them are in this comic. It's just awesome. And so the Jackal Saga runs through the first 2.5 issues of this reprint series. I gotta say, the first 2 issues are some of the best cosmic comic book storytelling you could humanly get. This is comics at its finest. Now, the third issue, where we wrap things up, the Jackal gets a little weaker, I feel like, towards the end here for no particular reason. And there's a little Deus Ex Machina at the end. I will still say what we do get is still very, very good. Maybe a little anticlimactic, but still very, very good. And there is a super epic way that they finish off Jackal at the end, and it's awesome. And one quick note is that even though Ultra 7 is on the cover, he is conspicuously missing from this first issue. He's the only Ultra with a series that doesn't appear. And that was because he had story reasons in the TV series to not be active at that time. But he does start appearing in issue 3 and actually gets his own solo story. So I guess it makes up for it. But I just wanted to let you guys know that, because if you pick this up, you might think like, oh my gosh, why doesn't Ultra 7 appear at the beginning? Like, did they miss some pages when they reprinted it? No. There were some other circumstances, so just want to let you guys know that. And so what we get after that is a series of shorter stories, which I don't think are quite as original or quite as amazing as the Jackal Saga. But I mean, the Jackal Saga is something that honestly to this day is still influencing cosmic comics. That story has been done in Green Lantern. It's been done with the Nova Corps. So obviously, that was, kind of a magnum opus for this series. But what we get afterwards is still very good. It still continues to introduce new threats in outer space that threaten the Ultra homeworld. And, you know, some of them, it's definitely a lot of anime influence, you know, a lot of guys you might expect to see like on Tranzor Z as opposed to Ultraman. You know, so I feel like it stretches, you know, kind of what you might expect in an Ultraman story, but I never feel like it goes completely out of bounds because, you know, when you're in space, you're going to fight different things than you would on Earth. I mean, you know, on Earth is kind of a podunk, you know, backwater planet. If you are in the, you know, the pinnacle of civilization in the universe, you're going to be fighting different things. You're going to, you know, encounter different things. You're going to act different. And so this really gave a really great logical reason to do something different with these characters, but still felt like it belonged with these characters. And I'd really say that this series is a cross between Ultraman, Space Battleship Yamato, and Mazinger Z. It feels like a culmination of everything that made 70s anime cool. And where else are you going to see an obese Ultra with a mustache? The only real detractor I found was the dialogue. Sometimes it is terrible. And I don't know if that's because it was written that way or translated that way, but one must remember that this is a 1970s comic aimed at children and cut it a little bit of slack. I mean, let's face it, guys, none of us are buying this for the dialogue. We are getting this to see Ultras kicking ass in space, and this delivers in an incredibly epic and wonderful way. So overall, yes, I do recommend this 5-issue miniseries. It is a must-own if you're an Ultra fan. Now, it's going to be kind of hard to find. It is not a common comic. I had to go through different sources to get it. And, you know, buying it from 2 different retailers, I was able to get it for probably about 40 bucks. A lot of retailers are going to charge you a lot more. Just keep in mind that these are 5 issues that are 64 pages a piece. Again, the equivalent of 15 regular issues. So you are getting a lot for, you know, what you're paying. Plus you are getting, you know, some really great, wonderful historical comics that are amazing. So that's my thoughts on Ultraman Classics Battle of the Ultra Brothers. So I only have one more retro review before I cover all of the Ultraman comics that were published before Marvel started publishing Rise of Ultraman. And so that will be next up, will be the last series, which will be another reprint of an Asian comic, this time from Dark Horse. And so currently I am watching the series it's based on, and I'm almost done with that. And then I'll take a little bit of time to reread it, and hopefully within the next few weeks, you will be seeing the review. So next time, we'll be looking for a hero, a man with all the right stuff. Join us for Ultraman Tiga. See ya.